Withhold not your truth or kindness, Lord. Withhold not your truth or kindness, Lord.
Welcome to The Notice, where together we notice the mercy of God. I'm Susan Hoekstra, your host. On this episode of The Notice, do you find yourself trying to understand why your life ended up the way it did? Maybe you're waiting for something to change or to figure out what to do next. You want to stay tuned for this episode of The Notice, where I talk with Solé Wright, author of the book After Some Time. We talk about her remarkable story, her book, and how healing really does come after some time. Solé Wright is a certified fitness trainer and lifestyle wellness coach who guides women in overcoming personal challenges. She understands the impact of unresolved trauma on personal and spiritual growth. Her approach to health and wellness is to care for the whole person, body, mind, and soul. After raising 4 children, she is pursuing her dream of sharing her redemption story and how Jesus has met her on this journey. She enjoys a strong cup of coffee, reading, hiking, and taking long walks. Solé and her husband live in Cedar, Michigan, where they dote over their beautiful grandchildren. Solé and I connected recently at a Convo event where we had on our property to encourage Christian women who lead. So I'm so glad to have Solé here. Welcome.
Thank you, Susan. I'm happy to be here.
Well, I have to say, after we met and I dived into your book, I was so excited because, as I told you, I feel like I was spending time with you. And I think that as readers get to know your book, they're going to feel the same way. But tell me a little bit about how your life trajectory has happened. Like, can you tell our listeners how you end up as a fitness trainer and lifestyle wellness coach?
Yes, from a very early age, my mother was very much involved in fitness. Now, her idea of fitness was looking good, not necessarily the health aspect of it. So as a young child, she instilled exercise to look good. So this cultivated a love and a desire for learning the health aspect of fitness. So throughout my life, I employed a healthy lifestyle. And as my children got older, I decided to be a certified fitness trainer. And what I did is I basically taught fitness classes on a donation basis because I wanted women to gain that desire, that love of exercising and to incorporate a healthy lifestyle. And when my mother passed away in 2016, she died of lifestyle-related diseases. As she got older, she stopped the exercise part of her journey, and yet the unhealthy habits developed lifestyle-related diseases. And it was then in 2016 when I decided to become a lifestyle wellness coach. And then I wanted to incorporate the exercise and lifestyle aspect of wellness. My point in doing this was to encourage women towards healthy aging.
Sounds good. Sign me up. Sign me up. Well, throughout those accomplishments, you've raised 4 children. You're enjoying your grandchildren. And of course, both of us live in this beautiful part of northern Michigan. But, your story goes a little deeper, doesn't it? Deep enough that you wrote this memoir entitled After Some Time. So tell me, what led you to write this book?
It's interesting because I am not a writer. I never have been. My strengths in school when I was younger was always science and math. So I was on a run one day, and it was in my 30s, and I can't remember if I was listening to praise music, I was praying, or I was just running in silence. And I can remember exactly where I felt this impression in my heart. On my run, I felt this deep impression in my heart that I was going to write my redemption story one day, and I felt that it was a divine intervention. So I was excited about it, thinking that God was just going to pour into me. I would be on my keyboard and everything would flow. So I remember going to my computer and starting to write, and it was a challenge. But I knew that this was a divine calling, and I dabbled into writing. I took some writing classes, and with the busyness of motherhood and where I was in life, and I was working at a public school back then, it kind of distracted me from this calling.
Sure.
But I truly believe that God, at that point, that God wanted me to write my redemption story up to that point, up to my 30s. What I didn't realize, it was an after some time event, that many more things were going to take place before my story was actually ready for print. My story is not completed yet, but it's ready for print. And it wasn't until, it's been 20 years later.
So the first idea came when?
In my 30s.
Okay.
So this has been 20 years in the making.
20 years in the making, yes. Mine took about 14, so
Wow.
I can relate to that.
Yes.
And I wrote my book once, and then I put it on a pen drive and lost the pen drive somehow.
Wow.
Couldn't find it, and I had to rewrite the whole thing again.
Oh, my word.
Yeah. So I can relate to the feeling, that calling, because I didn't, I like to write, but I'm not looking to be an author or something. I just mostly said, okay, God felt this pressing on my heart to say, you need to write this.
Interesting.
Is that how you felt too?
I
or?
did. And what's interesting about it is that it was my mother who wanted to write her story of redemption. I watched her just dabble into writing, and I remember her telling me once that she wanted to share her story. And this makes me think of King David, how he wanted to build the temple for God. And he had this strong longing and desire to build the temple. And it was his son, King Solomon, that built it.
Right.
And that's one of the pictures that kept me going. It was like, this was my mother's dream to write her story. And that's why I included so many parts of her story in the book. Yet I was the one that was to fulfill that dream.
Right.
Isn't that interesting?
That is. I love that connection there. And so the book is called After Some Time, right? So what made you decide on that title?
Well, when I was young, I struggled, as you read in my book, with suicide ideations. And I was in a time in my life that I did not believe that life could change. I was in such a dark place that I thought this was it, that I was always going to be depressed and that nothing would change, and that I was just at a very dark place. There was no hope. Now, if someone would have told me back then as a struggling 14, 15-year-old that if they would just give me a picture of what my life would have been today, I would have never believed it. So that's the picture of after some time. We could be in the darkest valley, but we need to have that hope that after some time, the Lord will take us out of that valley. And we see this, the after some time aspect throughout the Bible. The Israelites were in the wilderness after 40 years. So after some time, the Lord gave them the promised land. After some time, Sarah bore Isaac. And after some time, God sent Jesus, our Redeemer, to redeem us.
And after some time, he's coming back.
And after some time, he's coming back. So after some time gives us hope that our story is still being written. Whether it is 10 years, 20 years. For me, I had a huge breakthrough that I write about in my book. And I was 51 years old. And after some time, God redeemed a beautiful part of my story that I had no expectation of redemption. And that's what the book is about. I share things that I wanted redemption on, and then things that the Lord just gave me a beautiful gift of redemption as in restoring my relationship with my mother. That was a beautiful gift that was unexpected, but that was an after some time encounter.
I have a friend who once said to me she wants to write a book in God's timing and all that crap. And partly it was because what she realized is come to realize is that God doesn't have a watch.
No, he's not bound by time.
And because he's not bound by time, his timing for things are different than ours. And I don't know about you, Solé, but I've found that after some time, his healing is actually what you want. You want that pure, real, solid healing, not just a symptomatic relief, but that real solid healing. So can you tell us a little bit, maybe one of the things, redemption stories in the book?
I can, and I'll mention the one with the restoration with my mother. And after some time also means that with this situation with my mother tried to abort me multiple times. And I share the reason, and I'm not excusing her behavior or condoning this activity, but I share the story behind her decision. So there was always a hidden tension between us. It was always there. She probably had guilt over the act of what she tried doing to me and what she actually did. We always had this hidden tension, and I never felt connected to my mother. We didn't have that bond that I have with my children. After some time, she was over my house, and we got, it was very typical of us to get into a little spat, but it was basically that hidden tension that we never resolved. And during this spat, I just spewed on her, like, you weren't there for me when I was being abused. You weren't there. And I just threw all these darts at her, and it was a bullseye every time. But when I saw her just become deflated and so hurt by my words, I wished I could take that back. But that was an opportunity for the Lord to redeem us, both of us, our story. At that moment, my mom went to the edge of my bed. She sat down and she opened up in a way that she's never opened up before. And she shared with me her story. She asked me to forgive her for not being present and not seeing what was going on. And I was able to forgive her. It was just such a beautiful, after some time, moment of redemption. And this was not something I expected from God. Took our relationship as, this is just the way it is.
Right.
It's okay. This is just the way it is. My
It's
mother
just
and
mom
I.
being mom.
Right. We will never have that connection. But God is so good. And he did that for both of us because she needed to let go of possibly the guilt of trying to abort me, the guilt of not being there to protect me from my stepfather. And I was able to extend that forgiveness towards her. And it was almost like instantly we bonded. So there's that hope that, and I've spoken to so many women that didn't have that close relationship with their mother. And that's a longing of our heart, isn't it?
It is.
But we never know what God is doing behind the scenes. And we need to do our part to be open and vulnerable with our mothers, with our brothers, sisters, whoever it may be that we're looking for restoration.
Right. But you notice that after it took some time.
Oh, that had to have been in my late 30s. And it was such a gift. It was such an unexpected gift. But God did that in so many different ways in my life that I share in the book. And, some tough situations like, trying to end my life, and how he's shown me, he's given me a new life and a new identity in Christ.
So one of the things I loved about how you shared in your book was I was drawn into the beautiful way you write. It's very personal and intimate, much like it is spending time with you. You're articulate and beautiful, and you express yourself so lovingly. But I love the way that you weaved your story into devotional thoughts, so that the reader at the end of a chapter, you have some questions or something. Talk a little bit about the format of the book and why you decided to go that way.
Well, I think it was divine intervention again on how the book evolved. I'm sure you experienced this as well in your writing. The book tends to take a life of its own. What I thought was going to be a memoir that, I was just wrestling with the Lord. Who wants to hear about this, Lord? I want the reader to become impacted by it. And it's interesting that this evolved into a devotional. And the point being is, throughout the years, through coaching, friendships, Bible studies, I've spoken to hundreds of women, and it's always been in that intimate cup of coffee, or through Bible study, or after an exercise class where women want to talk and open up. And that's why I did the format. So I added enough of my story to stir the reader into their own story. And that's why I have those probing questions. And I've had a lot of feedback telling me those questions are incredible, because what I'm trying to do is draw the reader's story out. Like, what's your story? Where have you struggled in this? Is there substance abuse in your life? Where do you run to when you are stressed? In an effort to have them unpack and see where they can lean on God to, or what they need to work through.
Right. And so it's not like a book where it's like a story and you go on to the next chapter. No. It's like almost each chapter you have to take a pause
yes.
and reflect on Wow. Let me sit with that for a minute. And I actually did that a couple of times. Like, at first I just wanted to read through it because I'm like, oh, what else happened, But then I realized, I wasn't taking the time to look at that and reflect. And it's like if I were in a conversation with you, that would be different. You wouldn't necessarily tell everything all at once. You might tell me a little bit of one story or something about yourself, when we reveal ourselves to other people, right?
Exactly.
So there was this time where I had to think about, wow, I wonder what it would have been like to feel like your mom didn't want you.
Mm-hmm.
And that also gave me like empathy for you. I mean, she might have felt that way. And it made me want to hug you, because I was like, oh, Solé, no, you're okay,
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad you're here,
Thank you.
It's those kinds of things that I was impacted. Was that what you were kind of trying to go for? Is that the reader would feel those kinds of things?
I was trying to go for the reader to feel those kind of things for themselves. So we've all been through grief. My first chapter opens up with grief and anger, the process of grief and all those emotions. And most of us have lost a loved one, have lost a friend. So I wanted to stir up the feelings of grief, for instance, or being angry at God. I've spoken to so many women that are ashamed because they've been angry at God, or they've been told you cannot be angry at God.
Right.
So it's to dismiss these things. It's like, hey, God can handle your anger.
He can.
Bring it to him.
Bring it.
It's almost a release. Like, you have permission. So I'm sharing my story in an effort to give the reader permission to feel those feels, to enter into that, into their own story, and to walk with the Lord. Hey, God, help me unpack this anger.
And what's so cool about that is that I think as a community, we're starting to get used to the fact that we actually need to be more present with people. Mm-hmm. We need to let them tell their stories and not dismiss them. Mm-hmm. I feel like there's a drive around our culture to listen more. And I think this is a good thing. And it's interesting because one of the things I noticed is that when you talk about after some time and you talk about being present with people and on all those things that you discussed, it's almost as if you want to affirm the reader and let's take notice of your story.
Yes.
Because this podcast is about taking notice. What are we taking notice of? We're taking notice of God. We're taking notice of how God has intersected in our lives and ways that God is doing things that we're not aware of. So tell me a little bit about that. Tell me how, in writing this story, writing the memoir, writing the book, and in your life, how has God taken notice of you?
Wow, he sure has in so many ways. Can I just go back to affirming the reader?
Sure.
When you mentioned that, I thought about secrets that women keep, and that is one way to affirm the reader in secret keeping, because we believe that we're keeping secrets and we do not realize that the secrets are keeping us. And it was one of those things when I wrote this book and I hit on these tough topics that women tend to keep secrets in, right? So in an effort, I am telling women, hey, you're not alone in this secret. I've done that too. I've had these thoughts too. There's a chapter that I write about, and I don't want to spoil the book, but about trying to get rid of my offender. And I have heard women that, I've had women in domestic violence situations saying, boy, if I had a gun, I would have killed him. And they had those harsh, strong feelings deep down inside. And we tend to keep these ugly secrets to ourselves. But I've had 2 women within a month's time tell me the same story, that if I had a gun. Or,
wow.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, how many more are out there that are keeping those secrets? So that's how I want to affirm the reader, not telling them to carry out those strong, hard feelings, but talk to someone about them. You're not alone. No matter what you think you've done or has been done to you, you're not alone.
And to embrace those thoughts, because those thoughts might be leading you to a healing that you don't even know. Because to accept your anger and deal with that anger is part of the healing, right?
Absolutely.
So I know for myself that I've had to press into some feelings that I didn't think were very Christian light.
Right.
You know, because, I'm not supposed to feel that. You know, whatever things are lovely, whatever things are pure. And I'm not making fun of that verse, that God really wants us to center on those things. But we need to get real and authentic and make sure that we're not hiding those secrets. You know, like I have a friend who works in a ministry where she works with women who have gone through abortions. And it's for the healing for them. And part of their challenge is just telling that secret.
Right.
Noticing God through those secrets.
So noticing God, now I'm going back to your next question.
Yeah, no, great.
I have noticed God in so many aspects of my life. I'll start with just noticing him and how he saved me from becoming aborted. Noticing him on how he chose to give me life. He noticed me in that aspect. God noticed me when he put a friend in my path during those very dark teenage years when I tried taking my life, and having this friend, and her words were so divine. Her words were, hold on, life will get better. And I held on to that as much as I could, but life will get better. So if anybody out there is listening, life will get better. Hold on, because God is at work. God noticed me when he sent my Savior to change my life and free me from substance abuse at a time when I needed it the most. He gave me a new identity. He noticed me in that, and he notices me every day. In the Bible, it says when Jesus saw him, he saw them and had empathy. He saw and had compassion. He noticed me recently, and this is my what I'm currently wrestling with the Lord, and I write a little bit about it in the epilogue. I was recently, a year ago, in a tragic car crash, and he noticed me when he spared my life, and unfortunately, there was loss of life in that accident that I'm still wrestling with the Lord, and
It's hard.
It's a struggle. It's a year later, I'm still wrestling. My joy has never been the joy that I have in the Lord. That is my strength. I have had a season of grief, but he still sees me. He notices me. He notices the pain and the grief. And I know without a doubt there will be an after some time redemptive story surrounding this accident. And so far, God has shown me little glimpse of it, even during the tragedy of a death.
And didn't the book come out around the same time that
The
this
book,
happened?
well, what's interesting is a week before the car crash, I was at a biblical counseling retreat to study to become a biblical counselor. And the Monday when I got back from the retreat, I received the book back from the proofreader. And the accident happened on a Thursday. So my book was scheduled to go out on Mother's Day in honor of my mother, and it was not published until December. It was you can imagine, just the recovery. I'm still in recovery.
Sure.
But it's interesting because that's horrible, and with that brain injury and my legs being damaged the way they were, my joy never left. And I cried every day. I still weep, but there was this joy that coexisted with grief. And I have
Sort of
never
painfully wonderful. Isn't it?
I've never experienced
Yeah.
that in my walk with the Lord. I have never experienced joy coexisting with grief.
That's good. Were there any Bible verses that seem to help you get through these different aspects of your life?
Yes, 2 Corinthians 12, 9 and 10, and I know a lot of us go to this one, but he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you.
That's a good one.
For my power is made perfect in weakness. And let me tell you, I was so weak. I was so broken during that time. And I remember, black and blue eyes, bruised body, and looking at my husband and telling him, because I didn't know what was the outcome of the other woman in the accident. I didn't know all the details involved. And I remember looking at my husband through tears and saying, I will never dishonor my Lord. No matter what comes out of this, no matter if I lose my leg or what comes out of this, I will never dishonor my Lord. And he heard me. And I believe that's when that joy filled me. And that's when, the joy of the Lord is my strength.
Right.
That was another one that kept me. And here, in this Bible verse, it says that, therefore I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong. because I could not have done it on my own. I still can't.
Right.
I still can't. It is his strength in me, through me.
Do you feel like he equipped you to handle this part of your journey?
Oh, wow. That's a good question, Susan. It's a wrestle. I can honestly say he's
Because
taken me through
sometimes you
so
might
much.
feel like you can handle it, the joy and the Lord is strength, and other days you're probably like, I can't do this.
Well, I'm wrestling. I am wrestling with the Lord, if I can be transparently honest. The woman in the car crash was my son's age. She was expecting a baby, and my daughter was expecting at the same time. And there were other factors that
So sorry.
so close to my life. And so there's that grieving. Even recently, holding my new grandbaby, I just had another grandbaby, and holding this grandbaby took me back to this woman, thinking there's another mother out there that's not holding her grandchild. So that's the wrestling. It's the wrestling. It's because I'm a deeply empathetic woman.
Right.
And the accident was not my fault. There was nothing I could do to prevent it. It was the other driver, unfortunately, that lost control of her vehicle. But it's that empathy that I have for her family. There was just a connection made right before impact that I will never forget this woman, and I'll never forget, I pray for her family.
Right.
So has the Lord equipped me for this? After some time.
I
may know, because a year later, I find myself wrestling with the Lord. I'm more at the point in my wrestling where he's like holding on to my Achilles heel.
Right.
Or no, not my Achilles heel, my hip joint.
Your hip joint. Okay.
He's like pressing on my hip joint to let go. Let go and let me use this story for my glory.
He's using it right now.
I pray that he is.
This episode reminded me of a scene from the movie Shall We Dance with Richard Gere and Susan Sarandon. Susan is having a conversation with a private detective she hired about, of all things, marriage. She asks him, why is it that people get married? His answer was, passion. She answered, no, it's because we need a witness to our lives. After all, there's 1 billion people on the planet. I mean, what does any one life really mean? But in a marriage, we're promising to care about everything. The good things, the bad things, the terrible things, the mundane things. All of it, all the time, every day. You're saying to this person, your life will not go unnoticed because I will notice it. Your life will not go unwitnessed because I will be your witness. This scene really impacted me. Over the 20 years I have worked with women one-on-one, a common theme I see is how necessary it is for us to have someone to tell our stories to. Certainly, there's the companionship aspect, but also we just need to be heard, to be seen. And if we've been through traumatic events, we may need it even more, since telling our story is a crucial part of healing. But one of the things Solé said was that we need to be free to struggle about these secrets, to wrestle even. And the most powerful thing she said was, we believe we are keeping secrets, but the secrets are keeping us. So listeners, I encourage you, go ahead and find a safe person to let your secrets out to. Find a person who notices or wants to be your eyewitness. It's just another reason we all need each other. Should you wish to purchase Solé's book, you can do that on Amazon. Just search for the title After Some Time by Solé Wright. I promise it will touch your heart. Until next time, take notice.